Hello everyone, welcome back to another review, and this time we're talking about Suicide Squad numbers 53 through 58, which collects the Dragon's Hoard arc as well as a tie-in to War of the Gods, which we won't really talk about. It's another one of those obligatory 90s, early 90s at this point, DC events that doesn't really affect the main book that much. So the Dragon's Hoard takes place right after the last batch of issues, but importantly, there's not a lot here that hinges on information that you knew previously or sets up too much information going forward. The one big moment here, or actually the two big moments here that really mean anything, are that Adam Cray, the new Adam, is exposed to the team. They know that they're working together now, and Deadshot confirms to Amanda Waller when he gets called Deadshot that he killed Deadshot previously and that now he's just Lawton, and that's something that we'll pick up more in detail on when we talk about the final arc in the next review. As this stands, I think this is one of the easiest jumping on points for Suicide Squad possible. And I don't say that because you can really appreciate the book all on its own, but I say that because it's so simple that I feel like you could take this arc from 53 to 57, excluding 58, give maybe a couple flashbacks here and there and turn this into an animated movie, and then just deal with the Suicide Squad on a mission. This feels really James Bondian. This feels really action-adventure. This feels like all of this character work has been building and getting so intense to a point that now we're just going to try and breathe a little bit and have a little bit of relaxation. Not to say that the story is without depth, but that it's just more of a fun story than it is anything else. Basically what happens here is the squad gets hired to go after a hoard of weapons that is nicknamed the Dragon's Hoard in Japan, and these weapons are being handed off to a very specific branch of the Yakuza, and the plan here feeds into a bigger storyline near the end of the book. This whole side group that the government is funding and kind of creating a new type of Suicide Squad, but not a lot of that's discussed here. It's basically just really minor setup that you can catch up on at the start of issue 59, so it's not that big of a deal. Really what this story exists to do is introduce the idea of how these characters view their role in the Suicide Squad, and then let them just go loose and have fun. Or the most fun you could possibly have when being bombarded by Yakuza soldiers and millions of weapons while running around in Japan. Because, you know, that's crazy fun. Anyway, so this team gets split up and they go on their own separate ways, of course, to tackle this mission from various angles. And in true Suicide Squad fashion, every issue ends with the mission getting progressively worse, because you can't really have a Suicide Squad book without at least a high rate of failure. Lots of things go wrong right from the onset, but it's used to pretty good effect because it creates a nice sense of suspense, because we're in this really nice, really exotic location with Japan. We're doing a little back and forth stuff with Afghanistan. We're kind of in a war zone when we follow Deadshot and Steel Wolf and I think Count Vertigo around. We're in a good situation with some of the Barbara Gordon Oracle stuff, where she's kind of like the new mission head for some of this. We get some nice emotional stuff with Amanda Waller, just because we've seen her in situations here that we haven't seen beforehand. That's the big thing here. There's a moment here where Amanda Waller gets attacked and she gets shot a few times and the Atom saves her, but it's the first time in the book where she's ever been really physically hurt and taken off guard, and she's one of the most stubborn people imaginable, so you can imagine that she doesn't take the attack lightly, and she does fight back, and it's pretty well done. But it's the first time I think I've ever actually feared for her life, because the big thing about the Suicide Squad is that everyone is kind of expendable. You'll always actually at least have to have like one or two people come back just to keep the book going, and so you don't have to build a new cast every issue. but literally anyone could go at any minute. And you never expect it in your mind to be Amanda Waller. So when you get to that point where she gets shot down, and then she turns out to be alive, it's actually a really nice emotional roller coaster. It's actually, it feels less like a gimmick and just feels like a thrill of the moment kind of story where you're so engrossed in the ride that it's all right if they pull a couple of convenient things here and there, because it is about the atmosphere and it is about reading for the fun of this particular story arc. The big thing that I really latched on to reading through all of this, as I always do because I love Deadshot so much, or Lawton as he likes to call himself in this particular arc, is that Lawton and Vertigo are out in the forest, taking on a big army with artillery cannons and such, and they brought along Steel Wolf, who is a former Russian agent, and they have to use him to get through a particular situation, and to keep him under control, Deadshot's got like a laser pistol that can burn through his extremely dense skin. But the pistol breaks in like the second issue of the arc, so he has to just kind of play it as a bluff all the way through. And it's actually reasonably fun to go through and see all the situations where Deadshot's trying to threaten him and he doesn't lose his cool, as well as just ditching the guy when it's most appropriate for him. It's actually kind of fun, and it makes Deadshot's sort of detachment, completely nihilistic behavior a little bit more comedic than it's usually taken as. And that's something that gets turned up more with these last few issues, is that the book becomes more and more aware of how kind of ridiculous some of these people have become, and despite doing really dark, really interesting political and character and psychological stuff, we are having a little bit of fun with it, particularly when literally every time there's a problem, Deadshot will just say, why don't you just shoot it? Whatever the answer, whatever the problem is, it's just, let's just shoot it. And that's used to some good comedic effect all the way through. We get Katana here, who shows up as part of a different familial obligation to the same sort of situation, and Bronze Tiger works with her for a little while, which is fun. We've got her outsider's costume, not the armored, more Japanese look that we have now, but like the yellow and red costume. That looks pretty cool. We have some really great dynamic action in this. The thing I mentioned in one of the previous reviews is that Ostrander is fantastic with action because he knows when to place narrations and when to place dialogue. You're not constantly reading thought bubbles in the middle of action scenes. So they're allowed to flow at points. And so getting more of like a traditional Eastern combat with swordplay and stuff done in that style, it's actually really nice. It's a good feast for the eyes. The big theme that permeates through this particular chapter, it's not really for character progression as much as it's just to hammer home the point of the story, is the idea of humanity versus obligation. And a lot of these characters have made pacts and they've made vows, and they are bound by certain customs and certain actions. And at what point do you become a duty automaton and less of a human being? And at what point can you be a human being without obeying some obligations? And it's all about the amount of control you can exercise and the lack of control you can exercise, and that balance you have to strike to truly be an alive person. And I really like that. I think that's a worthwhile, interesting theme to explore, especially considering that this whole book has been about the damages and effects of power and control. And of course, being in the debt of someone is a shift in power. And so it does a really good job of making the point in a very nuanced way, as opposed to beating you over the head with how that works, particularly because you're in a Japanese location. You could very easily just kind of stereotype the whole honors thing. But Ostrander doesn't do that. It's surprisingly simple about it. And you can enjoy the story without necessarily thinking about it on that level. But it does serve as a good natural progression based on the way this run has been working so far. This is the most fun of the Suicide Squad arcs. It's extremely simple. I really don't have a lot to say on it. I think I'm pretty much done here. But I enjoyed it a lot. And I think at this point, Ostrander seems to just be kind of taking a break and relaxing and sort of trying to give us a place to kind of ease our minds before we get into the final big heavy arc, because he didn't know he was going to get canceled at 66. The rumors started flying around issue 60, so at this point he's still thinking he's got a good amount of time to deal with more stuff, and so he's able to use this space as kind of a breather. But I like it. I think it works well. I think it serves its purpose excellently. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with anything I said, how you think it stacks up against the rest of the stuff we've read so far. Thanks everybody for listening, and I'll see you next time with another review.